Welcome to the second class. This is the design class. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really excited about this, and I hope that you guys get a lot out of it. Um, Before we start, I want to thank with all of my heart Rachel for all the work that she does putting this and just about everything we do together. I kind of do high-minded things and say yes and no, and then Rachel does everything. We're all blessed to have her. And I'd also like to send that thanks to Kat as well, who makes all of our marketing and advertising and outreach material and really adds makes us look good in a way that I think is something that we've always wanted to present. We want to put our best foot forward, and she is able to bring that in a way that feels appropriate for our organization. So, with that, I would like to start here and let me share my screen. Not that screen. Get out of here. Um, can one person tell me if this is on everybody's screen?
I have it.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So, class two. Oh, what did I just do? Sorry, my computer's freaking out. Here. I don't know where. Oh, there we go. What are you guys seeing now? Can you show me?
We're seeing a slide that
Okay,
says
it's the full
training.
screen. All right, great.
Yes.
All right. So, um, I'll be reading a bit off the notes today. Um, and I didn't get much sleep last night, so if I start to ramble, you just say, Rachel, you can chime in. If if everybody else can make sure you mute your mic so that it doesn't interfere. So this class is this one and the next one are both really important in that they set up they provide two really important practical aspects of the work that we can bring out into our communities. Um, and in learning what we're doing with design or with plant identification, we can kind of take some of the lessons if we step back and look at instead of nitpicking and being like, okay, what they're saying in design is put this plant here because it's tall, but we step back and we say, oh, in design, we're trying to think about all of these deeper concepts about how people feel and move through a landscape and what makes us think things are beautiful. If we can take that kind of idea and then turn our attention to other things, we can see that those aspects apply. So today we'll be talking about design, and obviously we have. Oh, I hope I can move through this. We have, plants, how to build a garden, and where to put the plants in them, where to put the garden itself. Nope, I can't. I'm going to do something here because I can't actually move through the screen myself. Okay, there we go. So part one of our talk is going to be about the garden. How do we go from something like the side of a garage to a beautiful little garden? There are some relatively easy steps that if we just kind of are able to think about it, if you're not artistically inclined already, then you can start to become artistically inclined by just thinking about a few steps that kind of make up the process. The next thing is that we're going to talk about designing the experience. And to me, this is one of the fundamental portions of ADAPT and the training that we do. It's really cool to build a native plant garden, but it's really cool, as I said, to do it with community. And in order to do that, we really need to think about how we're going to interact with people when we go to their landscapes and how we, in a way, present ourselves as ambassadors of ecological knowledge. And again, regardless of where you are, we're always trying to meet people just where they are and just kind of move along the path together. Um, why won't you move? So I want to allay any worries. You guys will not be doing anything like this. So when I'm talking about design, we're going to do some really basic things. We're not trying to, we don't expect you to go out and design a person's garden. That is something that if you want to get into is awesome and you should do it. But if you start to do things like this, then you should be charging people because they are now your clients. So don't worry about this. They're ever thinking that you have to do something like this. And if somebody asks you to do it, make sure that you're charging them or sending them over to Adapt Landscapes. But the important thing is that you will learn why something like this makes for a good design. So we're going to have a brief overview of aesthetics or what makes things look good. So the first thing that makes anything look good is structure. And this just refers to the underlying framework of a garden. It's the bones that remain visible, even in the wintertime. So this will include, kind of, you think of just strong elements in the landscape. Trees obviously come to mind, hedges, hardscapes like paths and patios, built features like houses, fences. Strong structure provides clarity and coherence to a garden, a landscape, a house, really anything, any kind of architectural element that you're thinking of. And, in the best, if we're designing it, it's going to guide where a person is going to look, and it's going to shape really in a fundamental way how somebody feels the landscape. So, if we're thinking about design and structure, one thing you can think about, as this design shows, is just where are you placing the trees and what are they doing in the landscape? And then where are you putting the paths? How is a person moving through the landscape? The second idea that I think is really important is composition. And this is the arrangement of elements within the garden. And elements doesn't necessarily just mean plants, but it can. But it's really anything you're putting in there. So we really want to balance, having a cohesion, some unity of form and variety. We don't want things to be too monotone because that gets boring, and we don't want too much of just everything because it gets chaotic. So in the world of composition, we're considering scale, how big things are, and how they relate to each other. And that also leads perfectly into proportion. How much of this thing is going to be somewhere? Repetition. Are we using the same plants over and over and creating some kind of cohesion with that? And what are we doing to add in some contrast so that we can create some uh, either cohesion because of all of the other things match even better when there's some contrast, or adding some kind of aesthetic diversity. So, regardless, a well-composed garden will feel intentional, and that's whether it's completely formal and you have, rows of hedges and everything's just exactly in their place, or it's playful and you have flowing masses and drifts of plants. You can see this garden right here. Actually looks relatively formal given its location. It kind of had a small yard, and it's hard to make, a lot of playfulness unless you have, a year to do something. But you can still create an absolutely beautiful garden regardless, as long as you're thinking about the composition of where all the pieces are being placed. So the next aspect of aesthetics is flow. And I like to think of this in two ways. One is how people are moving through the garden. So there's a certain energy that all landscapes have, and that energy kind of guides you where you're going. I know in all of my friends' houses, even clients' houses, we go there and you can just kind of feel the path as it's moving. When you go to somebody's house for planting a garden, one of the things that you should just naturally allow yourself to open up to is what is the flow of this landscape. And if nothing's popping out to you, all you have to do is just ask the recipient, like, "Oh, take me on a walk around your garden, like where you normally go." Um, so in a bigger sense, this can be shaped by sight lines and transitions, sequencing of different plants. So it invites movement. It invites you to stop and reflect a little bit. Maybe it opens up a secret area and allows a little bit of exploration. But regardless of all those things, the most important thing is that a good flow feels natural, like the garden is unfolding itself to you. So the other thing is that flow um, can be within the plants themselves. And that creates a sense of movement that is psychological, and you don't actually have to physically move through the garden space. You can just look at all the lines that are traveling through the garden itself. So a next element, and one that I think a lot of people miss out on, or really don't give enough weight to when thinking about plant choices, is the texture and how certain things are going to play with your eye. Um, Texture adds like a richness through the visual qualities of the plants and materials. Smooth versus rough, glossy versus matte, fine versus coarse. Juxtaposing textures can create interest and depth, and it can also actually kind of create a lot of tension and release. And I really like that aspect of it. It to me it plays like jazz music. So if you like listen to jazz and you're like, when the sax player is just popping off and things are going totally crazy, he's building a lot of tension, and then all of a sudden he just hits some smooth note and bends it and it sounds really beautiful. That's kind of like you can play with that in the garden with texture. So next is probably the one that people think about the most. So you guys know about color. I really don't have to say anything about it, right? Okay, fine. So color is amazing. Um, I was kind of joking there, but it's really important, and it's not so important with the garden kits we're giving you because we've already thought so much about this. Um, but if you go on to doing your own, design work or planting a bigger garden, it's really important for you in the design process to not get caught in color too early. The other elements of the garden, um, are much more important because they create this, what we're going to talk about next, sense of feeling. And color can really add to the feeling if used thoughtfully. But if you're a person like me and you're just like, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that, you're going to just create a chaotic garden because color needs time to unfold and allow itself to be seen in a much larger context. So color sets tone and mood, uh, either through contrast or harmony. It draws attention. It can create rhythm. Much like, you use color, you're placing elements in the landscape. It can soothe the senses. If you have a nice cooling color and it's just drawn out over a large area, it feels amazing. Um, Effective use of color considers the bloom time, the foliage. So you should all remember that green is a color and it's a beautiful one, and so is brown. And there are lots of different colors of green and brown within our native plants. In fact, you can see quite a few right here, especially with the Antineria that's down there that has the gray green. And color changes in different light and in different seasons. And those things are also important to take care of, what or to yeah, take care of in your design. How is something coming in? What does it look like when the dewdrops are falling on it? So the last part, all of these things lead to, in many ways, what's the most important part from of the aesthetic from a design point of view, and that's feeling. And this is just the emotional resonance of the garden. When you go into it, how do you feel? And you can do so much by using all of those previous elements that we were talking about. You know, if you want something that's wild, you're going to stuff a lot of plants in there. If you want something that's more serene, then maybe you're going to get a few. Maybe you're lucky enough to be planting in the woods and it's overrun with invasive species. So you cut out all the buckthorn and you just plant a whole bunch of wild geranium. And you have this smooth sea of iridescent purple and pink. And you just feel really calm in that space. Um, so all of those elements contribute to this aspect of design. So again, we want you to wrap your mind around these things, but really know that you pretty much don't have to worry about it. Our kits are designed with these things already in mind. And furthermore, and this is a really kind of important thing as you guys go out and learn more and start to do your own gardens, the more you get into understanding your soil and your historic ecosystem, and the more fidelity that you can have to the plants that come from that, the design starts to take care of itself. All of these plants, any plants from a particular ecosystem, tend to work really well together. Design gets difficult when you're trying to create your native plant garden more as a conventional garden and you're trying to mix a bunch of different things that are from wildly different ecosystems and may have, you know, contrasting overlapping flowering time. The textures might be weird. So, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of you out there that love cardinal flower. I do too, but it's a native plant that people often want and plant in their gardens. And unless you have, you know, wet soil, it's really not a great plant to have. Um, and really even better, kind of wet partial shade is the best you can have. And then you mix it with a bunch of sedges and, you know, some of the other wildflowers that you would find in there, like maybe cutleaf coneflower. And all of a sudden, that plant can make just a lot of sense naturally. Um, so we're going to help you, you know, think about those things, but know that all of our plant kits, what we've tried to do is bring them together from the same ecosystem so that what we give to you just naturally works well. So the next step is where to put a garden. So this is really important because we do have a few requirements and we have a few desires. So one of our desires that's bordering on a requirement is that the garden should be in the front yard. And that's because we want the community to be able to have this garden. You know, we are offering these plant kits, the installations free of charge, but the idea is that the gardens are intended to kind of change in addition to, you know, bringing native plants into a landscape, they're intended to change people's aesthetic perspective. And the more that people see native plants in the landscape, the more they'll, ask questions about it. And that allows for conversation to happen and for community to build. And then the community is being built around native plant gardens. If the garden's placed in the backyard, if that's like the only thing that can happen, well, at least we get the benefit of there being some native plants there. If it's in the front yard as well, people are a little more likely to take care of it because they know people are seeing it. So just keep that in mind. Um, let me see I think everything's, yeah. So it's a really great idea to not plant near certain aggressive or invasive exotic plant species. And this is one where the next class will be really important for all of you. Learning some plant identification is really, really important so that if you go to a garden and you see goutweed or creeping thistle or vinca or pachysandra, English ivy, you know the plants and you know that the garden has to be a good distance away from that, or else the garden is going to get run over. A lot of people who are recipients and are getting a garden, they want to learn and they don't know, and so they'll see something and they'll be like, they'll look at their border of English ivy and they'll be like, oh, let's just expand that border. Well, if you planted the garden right next to the English ivy, you would have a garden of English ivy the next year because they probably wouldn't spend all the time that was required to keep the English ivy out. So let's not plant a bed over creeping thistle. Because again, you'll walk away a year later, it will all be thistle. I like to keep things away from the foundation of the house unless there's a bed already there. The reason is that it's really important that we take care of our homes and keep moisture away from siding and foundations. Um, when moisture can build up along siding, then the siding deteriorates more quickly, and then, or maybe somebody will miss something, and then Virginia creeper will start growing up their siding, and then all of a sudden they have to get it all redone. Um, Taking care of our homes is an ecological aspect of life as well. The less material we have to use to upkeep them, the better. So always be thinking about the person's home as well and trying to make sure that we're not doing something that may impact their home. A really great idea, and you can see this here. I love this. Here's another one right here, is have your gardens bordered by impervious surfaces, driveways, sidewalks, parking lots, houses. Um, all of those things are great because, as you see here in this bed, all that is lawn. They have to maintain that edge so that the lawn doesn't grow through. And at the in-person training, we will show you how to create a cut edge. And I believe there's a link for that video. Um, but if they don't have to do this, like over here, then this person's never going to have to worry about weeds crawling in. So this person over here has a driveway. That whole driveway is not bringing weeds in there. Street, no weeds. Parking lot, no weeds. This is what a lot of you who build gardens will probably end up doing. Somebody will want a new bed in the middle of the lawn, and that is totally fine, provided that this edge is made very clear, very deliberate, and strong so that the homeowner can clear it out really easily. Otherwise, especially during the establishment phase when we're watering these beds, the lawn grasses are going to love the environment and they're just going to crawl right in and basically undo. And one of the worst things, a native plant garden with a bunch of lawn grasses looks absolutely terrible. So then the last thing is, try to think like the recipients getting this garden, they should be able to like kind of sit in their house and look outside and just gawk at it, just dream about it. Um, think about the insects that might come. Think about the birds that might come. Think about how it might get bigger at some point. Um, that allows them to dream. It allows them to feel good, and that's a really important aspect of all this. So now I would like to talk about bed shapes, bed sizes, and where to put the plants. So let's see what this next slide is. So I don't want you to worry too much about the bed shape if you're creating a new one. There aren't many arrangements that work at such a small scale as we're doing. If you're building a bed, you're planting 38 plants, and we say make a roughly 50 square foot bed that you can then plant the plants 1 foot on center, and we'll talk about that in detail at the leader training. Um, and then with like a 6-inch border. So it's not a very large garden. And really, the best thing that you can do is have rounded edges. Circle, oval, bean. So circle, bean, stretch that out a little bit and you have an oval. Um, this is one I was thinking like if there was like, you'll have rectangular beds, right up against somebody's house. So maybe that would be appropriate, for something like that. Um, so if you need a 50 square foot bed, that's roughly a 5 by 10 rectangle, or a 5 by 10 oval or bean, or an 8 foot diameter circle. Um, so this gives the space for the plants, and then you create the nice cut edge around it. So we have the creating cut edge video, and I highly recommend, there's a link in the notes. Highly recommend checking out that video, because you'll be doing it yourself, and it's one of the things that can make a huge difference between your garden doing really well and your garden immediately going to crap. Um, so what I want to talk about next is where to put the plants. And actually, I'll still go back to here. So for these gardens, yeah, we recommend planting them densely. The density of the plants, planting them 1 plant per square foot, allows the plants to grow together quickly, taking up the space that would otherwise be occupied by weeds. One thing to note is that if you're using the woodland kit, we have heart-leaved aster in there, Symphyotrichum cordifolium. That is a super aggressive plant. So it's rhizomatous. So with that plant, you can actually take up a lot of space. You could plant it 2 foot on center, which is generally not recommended. And within a few years, it will take up all the space. Um, so here are some sample designs from our All-American kit. So here's Echinacea, here's Rudbeckia, and here's Sporobolus. These designs are pretty basic and they use the elements of aesthetics that we mentioned above. So there's you can't see it in the plan view, but there's a structure within this low growing garden. The echinacea is the tallest and is a very upright, stately plant. The Rudbeckia is a little bit softer, but still has a lot of structure to it. And then in front of that, it's offset by the Sporobolus that has a very fine textured leaf and just appears and feels very soft. Um, Composition, placement of elements within. So we see that, they kind of are making sense with each other. Maybe they're telling a story. If I look at this weirdly enough for a while, this and I maybe turn my computer on my side, this is a blonde uh, little girl who's blushing and like blowing a kiss, and then she's wearing some like green scarf. Um, I also like to look at clouds. Um, there's what else did we talk about? Flow. There's a flow. There's a nice flow. Texture is within the plants themselves. This has some very coarse leaves, sharp uh, points. These are a little bit more ovular. This is a really fine textured leaf. So these plants that we're looking at right here, and the plants that you will be planting are all in what we call the design layer. So we're going to talk about what's the second design layer here. So this is what I call the design layer. The upper one with the taller plants, I tend to call that the structural layer. Um, we are only designing with the design layer because there's only so much we can do in a small garden. Um, we will offer some advice, especially at the in-person training, about how you can get more of that functional layer in, and we will have optional plants uh, for each kit that the homeowner themselves could add into the garden if they wanted. Most of those will be the functional layer. So that would be like sedges, um, smaller sedges, strawberries, potentilla, small violets, smaller species that can move around that don't interrupt the design layer. So the design layer is basically what we're mostly seeing in the garden. This is the connection that's made. It's basically what people call the garden. When we do the functional layer, nobody sees that. So I want to introduce two important words that are important for you to think about within the design layer. And this is masses and drifts. So masses are just large clumps of a single species in the design layer. Masses work really well, and you can create a basic garden just using a few species and planting them in large masses next to each other. So our examples back here, these are all 50 square foot gardens. If you took this and did it times 10, so it was a 500 square foot garden, it would look amazing. It would be stunning for somebody, especially if you were walking straight in on those grasses and you saw those flowers kind of opening up before you, in a 500 square foot garden. So that would be what, 80 feet across. It would be phenomenal. So the same idea about how we're using masses, which are here, and then drifts, which are flowing ribbons of a single species, like this, can be taken to any scale. So here, big masses of single species, they kind of start to drift at the end, and then a big drift of this species and another, kind of little drift over here. Here we have flowing bands and large masses and then smaller masses. So I'm going to go back. So as I was saying, these can work at any scale. It's all relative. So if you each have a kit, each kit has 38 plants, so it's like 11, 12, or 13 of each species. If let's say, we had a community in Ann Arbor in which 10 people around a cul-de-sac all applied for kits and they planted the cul-de-sac. They could take this same idea right here, and instead of one plant right here, there would be 10 because they have 10 kits. And you can imagine that, 10 plants, 1 foot on center, planting really densely, that's 10 square feet. So you're creating a massive garden with just the same idea. Um, Try to remember these photos, and if you guys have any questions about this at the end, I would love to hear some of them. What time is it? Do you have the time?
7:40.
Okay, so I've been talking for too long, so let's take a deep breath and I will go through the next part. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the experience of community supported ecology. And this to me is really important. And thinking about designing it, um, may seem a little strange to people. Like, how do you design an experience? And, I think there's kind of a secret, which is that every marketing person knows that all they're doing is designing experiences. And so, you're getting into a psychological aspect, and that often seems kind of not relevant to ecology. But what is ecology anyway? And at a really basic level, it's the movement of energy through earthly biology. So it's animals eating each other, it's plants decomposing and bacteria eating that, it's mating, it's running, it's being a turtle on a log taking in the sun. So our interactions with other people is a form of energy transfer. And you all know this. The easiest way to know it is like you see an old friend and you get really excited. You have so much more energy than you thought you had. Or you run into an ex and you're like, oh, this sucks. I hate this. And you go through all of these different levels: physical, emotional, psychological, and you can even have, deep spiritual experiences. These are a form of our energy, and it's really, really, I think, important how we use our energy in this way. And so, how we interact with people is then, by definition, an ecological act. And the thing that I think is cool about this is that we get to choose, for the most part, whether this ecological act is a positive one or not. And that gives us a lot of power. So, what we bring to the situation, our recipients are going to feel. Um, and it's really good to know where you are going into a situation, especially if your recipient is a stranger, right? So, when I thought about, like, okay, man, I'm just going to people's houses and that I've never met, and I'm going to talk to them about ecology. What is it that I can really do here? And I kind of thought of these things. So what I always tried to bring was friendliness, kindness, and those are definitely different things. Um, Openness. Let me go back. Friendliness. You meet somebody and you're just there. And you're excited to be with them, you're excited to see them, and you're like, yeah, let's go do this together. Kindness is as simple as saying, thank you. So nice to meet you. Thank you for signing up. I'm really excited to do this with you. If you need help with something, you say please. These things really make a difference, especially when you're meeting somebody for the first time. Openness. Are you open to the experience of what even you're bringing to the situation and what the other person is going to bring to the situation? We have no idea who they are. Again, if you're working with somebody you've never met, we have no idea who they are. Um, are we open to that? And then can we accept what they bring? Now, this is often something that I want to put a uh, kind of stamp on, and that we don't accept bad or dangerous behavior. There's no reason why, if somebody is like really rude, you have to accept that. So boundaries are really important. But if somebody has different political points of view, then, we've had no interaction with them before. Let's just accept them who they are, be open to them, treat them with kindness and friendliness. And now, from this point forward, you have some influence over them, and you never know what can happen in the future. And then the last thing is groundedness. Now, when I say groundedness, it doesn't necessarily mean calmness, because I'm not necessarily a particularly calm person, but I am fairly grounded. And groundedness comes from acceptance of who you are and what your situation is. So you're going there, you may not know much of anything. If you can accept that and accept that, this could be weird, then you're going to be grounded, even if the situation feels kind of strange. And so what our recipients bring, we hold. and we hold it with all of these same things. Now, again, let's put an asterisk here. Somebody becomes, abusive in any way, insulting. These things have never happened to me personally. And I'm not sure if they've happened to anybody, but I still think it's important to know that, like, you don't have to accept those kind of, poor behavior from other people. So this is the most important part of adapt community supported ecology to me. You have the power to design a singularly positive experience. And when this experience is centered in community and ecology, using native plant gardens as our excuse, then an understanding of all of our shared reality as ecological beings can begin to grow. And we begin to see ourselves as a source for restoration and renewal. And I think this is so important because we are not taught ecology as children. We are not taught to interact with our landscapes. We aren't taught to know anything. We look outside and it looks green and it's fine. But once you start to dive in, you're like, oh, man, it's not so fine. But then when you start to dive in more, you're like, oh my God, it's so amazing. And this is something that we can give to people. Well, we can give it to ourselves first, but then we can give it to others. Um, but even the most important aspect of this is that you have to find your own way. What are the things that are out there in the world that motivate you? Because when you find those elements and they get you excited and your emotional world is energized by that, then you have something to talk about. And that's when your energy is going to be brought out to the world around you, and everybody will remember your energy. So, how do you come close to approaching this if you're nervous? You hold yourself with all of these things. And this may be sounding like a therapy session. And, you know, if it feels that way to you, take it for what it is. Um, it's helpful. If you can hold yourself with all of these things, then you're going to be able to hold others with that. Um, I notice I made a typo. Grounded knees. Um, so I'm holding myself with some acceptance of my spelling error right now. So at the end of all of it, um, after, especially, if you do a few gardens, you should have some kind of preliminary flow to your interaction with people established. And so I generally recommend, when you get your garden kits, try to just schedule everything at once. Try to get over that initial nervousness that you may have. You'll mess up, maybe. I don't know. It's fine if you do. We're not, there's a few of us who are, quote unquote experts. But we mess up all the time too, so it's fine. But the more that you get into it and the more you just expose yourself to the uncomfortable thing of, meeting a stranger for the purpose of planting them a garden, then it quickly, you get over the weirdness and then it just becomes this fun thing that you're doing. And then it starts to become playful. And um, honestly, I have so many pictures just like this of people who have planted gardens with their recipients, and their recipients are just pumped. And this is kind of what we should be aiming for. Some people are going to be naturally more flamboyant, and some people are going to be more reserved, and that's fine. But man, especially those reserved people, you see that little smile that they crack, and you're just like, your heart is just filled with joy. So this is kind of what we're going for. Um, I'm going to tell you guys what your homework is. So use yours or your friend's landscape as a muse and follow the ideas of where to put a garden from earlier and determine 5 potential locations for your 50 square foot garden. And then, and this is really important, validate your reasoning in writing. Literally write it down. Get yourself into the habit of not just thinking your thoughts, but getting them out. You can type it, that's fine. Getting them out there so they become a little realer. And just the process of writing can make a profound difference in how you remember things and can also get you thinking about what you're thinking correctly and what you're thinking wrongly, and can help organize your reasoning. Um, and then, from based on your research from last week, looking up all the garden kits, think of which kits would be most appropriate in which site. So, bonus points to anybody who can draw these beds to scale and then play around with plant placement, like the design you see here. Um, Drawing to scale is a whole nother realm. We're not even going to worry about that. Actually, after writing this, I thought that would be a fun class, fun online class over the winter. So I think we'll put that in our hopper. So the next little bit of homework is just imagine yourself going to your first recipient's house and imagine it as a stranger. Um, Play out the greeting in your mind. How do you feel walking up to their house? Are you nervous? Are you excited? Are you proud? Are you scared that you don't know enough? Are you worried? Do they have uh, a Trump flag and are you scared? Do they have a Harris flag and are you scared? How do you want them to feel? What have you done to think about, how you might interact with them? So, take some time to write down how your ideal garden planting would go. And, I think that can be a really great experience because you also kind of then think, thinking about stepping back from some of the minutia of design and bringing it out to the larger scale, to a bigger scope. Um, you know, Writing about how your ideal garden planting would go could bring about ideas for how other ideal um, interactions could go. So we have a few recommended readings here. These are all great books. Planting in a Post-Wild World, if you want to get into design, is probably a must-have. What I'm going to say is don't follow all their plant choices. Their goal is writing for people mostly in urban landscapes. They do have they talk about it as well, but they talk about a lot about cultivars and using exotic species that are quote well behaved end quote. All invasive species start off as well behaved exotics. So the next one is nature by design. And if you want to just like dive into the philosophy of ecological restoration and community-based projects, this book is absolutely mind-blowing. This book had a profound impact on my life. Without a doubt, Adapt Community Supported Ecology would not be here if I had not read that book. It's not an easy book to read. It is academic, and so so take that for what it is. And then the other one is, in a way, somewhat similar to Nature by Design, but it's called The Invention of Nature, and it's about Alexander von Humboldt and all of the things that he did in kind of transforming people's perception of nature as this thing out there kind of before, the, colonial period, nobody ever thought of nature because they just live, we all just lived. And it's so interesting to think about just a few hundred years ago, that was the case. And now, we are here trying to like reconnect with nature in a deeper way. So thank you all for designing a community with us. I would love to know what questions you have, and I take it there's a bunch in here. Doesn't having rounded beds kind of contrast with your point about trying to build them against sidewalks, driveways? I think like the rounded, I think I like the rounded look better, but also like the idea of less lawn weeds creeping in. So in that case, it's like I'm gonna hold up my piece of paper. Uh, Sidewalk, driveway, rounded bed, or rounded bed. So all it is about taking, you could do a 90-degree angle and then just, you know, curve it right there. So that's how you do that. Can you explain more about how we can go about offering the optional ground cover plants to the recipient? So there's no optional ground cover plants. We will have recommended plants that they can include in their garden that would work well with those. They would have to go get them themselves. And so what that would require is kind of all of you knowing where your local native plant nurseries are, and we can definitely help you with that if you don't know yourselves. Oh, thank you, Rachel, for having answered that already. Oh, cool. I'm glad. Maybe we need some more marketing people. How would you recommend planting for a multi-phase garden plan? Like when a person, oh, sorry. Like when a person plans a full sleeve tattoo. Um, that I would say is a professional level design and plan. That's too much work. We definitely can't get into it, and I would not recommend you get into it without charging unless you're really looking to do a lot of work. Um, which is totally fine if you are. I mean, it may be that you want to build gardens and you need a project. And if you do, then by all means, go ahead and do it. Get planting in a post-wild world. You can always, especially if it's in the winter, you can send us an email and we might be able to chat with you about it. And Beaky sent some in the chat has some flashcards that are really helpful. Oh, from Prairie Moon. Cool. Could Rachel or Kat, could one of you guys copy that and we'll put it in the resources? Ashley asked, the kits we get on the 17th, are we planting those on site during that day, or are those kits we will leave with and install, deliver to community members? Yes. So we will plant some kits. We will plant you will take kits home. Those same kits we will also, not those same kits. You know what I'm saying, right? We'll plant the same kits on site so that you have an experience of planting with plugs, using a drill, removing sod, etc. Um, Do you have any suggestions for a crash course for learning more about soil type? Kat, would you like to answer this one?
Well, first of all, there's in the next, no, not next class, in two classes from now, we'll talk about resources. And there is already a video up on YouTube that explains using the USDA soil map, but then there's also one that covers the Michigan State University Extension's natural features inventory vegetation circa 18, sorry, circa 1800 map. And I almost had that really, really all in one, and I that's never the part that I mess up on. It's a really long one. Um, but yeah, so those are two resources that we have to help. And then I would like to get up just looking at your soil video, and I can try to maybe do that before we um have that. But that's a real maybe on that. But then there's a few like YouTube things that I've watched that I think are good too, that I can put in like resources to that just kind of walk you through like I mean as far back as like what is all the soil, but then I guess more practically, like if you want like something like just looking at that soil triangle and playing in your soil and then kind of being like, oh, this is kind of like clay and this is kind of like sand and silt. So, and then going back to the soil triangle that you can find online. Does that help?
And is everyone familiar with the soil triangle that
Okay.
Pat is
Um,
referencing?
Oh, Nancy B, you
Oh,
asked that is the $100 question. Recipients do need to provide their own mulch. You as a community leader, if you have like a mulch stash, you are welcome to bring some. I think the gardens generally require 4 bags. Um, um, we recommend shredded bark mulch or wood chips. Um, don't use straw. Don't use old leaves that are decomposing, because often those things are going to have weed seeds. Kits exactly similar to the kits you are taking home. Yes. Free mulch at Growing Hope in Ipsy for anyone to take. There you go. So if you're going up to Ipsy, I believe if you're in Ann Arbor, also the We Care Organics Compost Center. I think you can take like a bucket of free mulch, but it's not enough for a garden.
you can
So
take a
yes,
yard.
You can dig a yard?
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
On Saturdays
Oh, wow.
in the morning, if you're an Ann Arbor resident.
Cool. So if you have an 8 foot bed, and your truck, you can go load up
Take
a
up
yard
to
of
a
mulch.
yard. And then as much as you want, if you want to shovel it into your own truck.
Oh, cool.
Because you're not going to fit a yard into that.
Oh,
Ann
that's
Arbor
amazing.
has wood chip dumps.
Oh, and Joe has chip drop. Chip drop's dangerous, unless you want to be providing mulch for the whole neighborhood. Um, let me think.
There's also
If
if you want
shady,
to
can
load
mulch
them
be
yourself,
skipped? Or
there's I think
otherwise, um, what I would say is that so shredded bark mulch is like the gold standard, and the reason it is because when you put it on, all of the shreds kind of weave themselves together, and then they're forced down when they water, and they form a mat that's really hard for seedlings to make it through. Um, if you leave the ground bare, you're in a race between how fast your plugs will grow and how fast the weeds will grow. And if there's a ton of weed seedlings, then you're going to have if there are a ton of weed seeds in the soil, you're going to have a big mess on your hands. And we don't want to get community leaders into a situation in which they plant a garden, then it becomes a weedy mess, and then they feel responsible for having to go weed it. If you want to help your recipients and you stay in contact with them and talk about weeding, then by all means do so. Can can you pull up the soil tray? You know what? I can actually. Oh, you can do it. And yeah, Cat can grab that. And the soil triangle is a cool way of understanding how all the different soil types interact. Really, that our tutorial on how to use the USDA soil maps is the best way to go if you want to learn soil type. Um, that is going to be really accurate for the most part, but something you'll notice as you like go through it, like on the bottom, it'll say like minor components. And then sometimes, the house that you're in will be the minor component. So you'll be on like it's supposed to be like uh a loamy sand, and all of a sudden you hit a pocket of clay and you're like, what is happening? Very frustrating. How big are the kits? Do you know the dimensions? Here, I can actually look that up if I
I mean
can
there
pull
are
up this.
38 count plugs.
No, the dimensions of the kits themselves. Dimension of
Oh, sorry.
38 count plug flat. 21 inches by 11 inches. Yeah. 5 inches deep. How'd you know that? That's amazing. So, yeah. So just under 2 feet, just under a foot, 5 inches. And we can show you ways to stack them. You can fit, oh man, I don't know. I've fit like 50 flats into a fairly small car. You just have to be good at Tetris. Are you good at Tetris? You can't. Um,
Flats here or
so
kits here.
I'll see if I can. Let's see if I just pull this up. Give me the full picture. Oh, that's weird. Nope, that won't do it. I'm trying to look for a soil texture triangle. Um, there we go. Line. So this is it. Um, it's It just shows you. So the three soil particles are clay, silt, and sand. And depending upon how you move in the percentage of these particular minerals. So is really large particles. Silt is significantly smaller, and clay is tiny. And so because the clay particles are so tiny, they bind together, whereas sand particles can kind of just mush around. Yeah, and so these are the broad classifications that you can work with. But then on the USDA map, it shows some real specifics, and it will say like, so like Ann Arbor is kind of all right here. It's all in the loamy sand, sandy loam, sandy clay loam, and loam. And this happens in like upland glaciated areas. Silts and loams, silty clay loam, tend to be in lower lying areas, and clay is in expansive plains that have been around for a long time. How can I stop this? All right. Well, you guys all have a lovely evening, and we will try to post this video a little sooner than we did the last one. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
All right, Rachel, how was that for you? All right, see you later, Tony. Oh, she just frozen? Weird. How do you end the meeting?